There's a field in Newcastle, right on the banks of the River Tyne here, about a half a mile further down there. It's about 1.5 acres, and underneath that field are buried about 40,000 dead bodies. Seriously, at least 40,000 dead bodies. And if you were none the wiser, you could walk right past it, you could walk right over the top of it, and you wouldn't even know what lies beneath. Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of this unmarked mass grave. It's coming up. Welcome back, it's Eddie here from Tyneside Life, and where I'm stood right now is the mouth of the Ouseburn as it flows into the mighty River Tyne. And the Ouseburn Valley is just behind my right shoulder there. Ouseburn, if you're not familiar with this part of Newcastle, it's about a half a mile east of the city centre, is one of my favourite parts of Newcastle for a few reasons. So before we start looking at this ghostly mass grave, let's learn a little bit more about Ouseburn and why it's important to this story. Ouseburn was once one of Newcastle's industrial engine rooms, a smoky valley of kilns, glassworks, tanneries and mills, the Little River driving big industry and the Victoria Tunnel feeding the Tyne with coal. Ships offloaded their weight here, building the ground beneath its feet. Ballast Hill, alongside stories of workers, sailors and dissenters. Today the clatter is softer. Art studios, indie breweries, live music, street art, cyclists and dog walkers share lanes where carts once rattled. The Tyne Bar, Brinkburn Brewery, The Ship, Clooney, Free Trade Inn amongst other cool establishments are popular to visit. Ouseburn is still graft and creativity, just with better coffee and fewer chimneys. Tanneries? Well, I had no idea there were sunbed shops back in the 19th century. But talking of coffee, one of my favourite places to come in Ouseburn for a coffee is right behind us here. It's in Northern Rye. Now, not being sponsored by Northern Rye, they've got no idea. I've been filming, but I do love to come here, sit on the bench outside and have a coffee and a baguette. But they do all sorts of homemade stuff, homemade breads and pastries and cakes and jams. And if you haven't been here before, check it out. It really is a lovely place. And if you do, make sure you mention my channel. The area that I'm stood on now, which is quite hilly just east of the Ouseburn River, is called Ballast Hills, right next to Brinkburn Brewery. And the Ballast Hills is integral to the story that I'm telling in this video about the dead bodies which in a field just behind us there, because there are ballast hills all along the south and north banks of the River Tyne. And it gets its name from ships which used to come into the Tyne, because for hundreds of years the coal pits of this regional area supplied London predominantly, but also other European cities with their coal. And the coal from the pits used to come down to the River Tyne and put onto ships. But when the ships come down the Tyne initially, they were largely empty of their cargo, but they had to have ballast in them to keep them steady. And ballast is like clay and rubble and other forms of muck. And that ballast had to be offloaded from the ship before the coal could be put on. And over decades and then centuries, that ballast, which was taken off the ships and dumped on the side of the River Tyne banks, got bigger and bigger and more layered and more spread out and more spread out, till it becomes indistinguishable. And over time, these hills along the River Tyne look part of the natural landscape, but they're artificial. And this is Ballast Hills in Ouseburn. And if you're wondering how they got the ballast off the ships, well, for a long time, there used to be women used to carry the ballast in baskets on top of their heads and drop them off on the riverbank. Now, women have been saying forever that they use their heads far more than men. Well, who am I to argue? And this is it. This is the Ballast Hills Burial Ground, which forms part of the Ouseburn Valley Conservation Area. And to look at it, you wouldn't blink. You wouldn't think twice about it. You wouldn't think there are tens of thousands of dead bodies underneath this fielded area just here. It's about 1.5 acres, roughly half the size of a football pitch. Records suggest that the actual burial site is probably about double this area, expanding into the areas where we now have buildings as well. Since at least the early 1600s, bodies have been discarded and buried on this unconsecrated land. During the 1600s alone, thousands were buried here due to the 4 outbreaks of the plague, particularly the big one of 1665. This site became known locally as Plaguey Fields. The area was also used to bury social outcasts and dissenters of the Anglican Church, Protestants, Quakers, Baptists, and Scottish Methodist immigrant workers. It was also used for those who died of cholera. The first gravestone in the area was dated to 1708, and during the 1800s, body snatching became a problem. Resurrectionists, as they were called, would open coffins and pilfer valuables. They would also steal bodies and sell them to nearby medical schools for research. There's a notable case of a 7-year-old girl from January 1829 after her remains were found a day after her burial. Between 1820 and 1825, more bodies were interned here than all of the Newcastle churchyards combined. According to a Newcastle Council report in 1883, roughly 16,000 people were buried at Ballast Hill from 1794 to 1825 alone. By the mid-1850s, all the churchyards in town were closed due to the unsanitary conditions caused by cholera deaths. Ballast Hill formally closed in 1853. In 1930, the site was turned into a playground for Ousburn School, which opened in 1893 after removing the hundreds of headstones. The school was closed in the 1960s, and after a few decades of abandonment, it is now the Newcastle Centre for Business Enterprise. The area of Ballast Hills beside the old school remains an area of tranquility and its dark past hidden from sight. Many of the headstones were used as flagging for the surrounding pathway, whilst others were relocated. And due to the erosion and wear, only a few inscriptions are decipherable. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Just where I'm stood right here, layer upon layer underneath, there are thousands and tens of thousands of bodies in an unmarked grave, unmarked burial site, hidden in plain sight right on the banks of the River Tyne in virtually the centre of Newcastle. I think it brings into focus as well what life must have been like in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. You know, if you're poor, if you're a dissenter, if you're an immigrant worker and you died, particularly of the plague or cholera, you were just chucked into a pit and covered with rubble and forgotten about. All those people with their own stories about how they got here and what they did. And now, beautiful, tranquil area. You wouldn't even think it's an artificial hill. With a beautiful Grade 2 Victorian building just there, steeped in history. If you're from this neck of the woods, you might have relatives, you know, your gran or your great-gran or your great-granddad. Probably went to school at Ousburn School just here. Probably played on these fields where I'm stood now. I would love to hear in the comments down below if you've got any stories like that. Please do share them. But also as well, if you haven't been to Ousburn, the Ousburn Valley generally, check it out, man. It's a lovely part of Newcastle. Really cool. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative and interesting. And if you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. And if you want to learn more about the Ousburn Valley and its history, check these 2 videos out. Thanks for watching.